Today we're going to do a deep dive on the Edelbrock VRS carburetors. It's not a copy. Back this past summer, I was very fortunate enough to be able to go to the Edelbrock facility in North Carolina to see my VRS 4150s being built. William, Mandy, and Jackie, they all did a killer job, and they treated me with the utmost hospitality. It was quite an experience. And so going through that, I've dynoed these carburetors, and I'll put a video of that in there so that you can see it.
Woo-hoo-hoo! 501.
And then I've ran it at the drag strip with CASPER. If you like this kind of content, go ahead and click below it to subscribe so that you stay in the loop of Unity Motorsports Garage videos. Carry on. We're going to do a deep dive into both a Holley 4150 and the VRS and talk about the similarities. Now, one of the common themes of the comments that I've received on my other videos is, well, it's nothing more than just a Holley copy. And that's not necessarily the case. I'm going to give you an example. That would be the same as saying that a Mustang is the same as a Camaro or vice versa. They're both pony cars, they're both coupes, but they're totally, completely different cars, if that makes sense. They're not the same. And so I think we need to really get into the nuts and bolts of this carburetor with a Holley side by side, that way that you can actually see the difference for yourself, and maybe I can explain how these carburetors work so good out of the box. Here they are side by side. You've got the VRS here on the right, and then you've got the old trusted Holley on the left. This is a street HP that was done up by the fine folks at Allstate Carburetor. Gerard and those folks, they've taken good care of me through the years. They have all of the bolts, hardware, gaskets that you need for all of your carburation, regardless if it's Holley, Edelbrock, Quadrajet. If it goes on a carburetor, they probably have it. If you were to start out building a carburetor from scratch, would you try to start with a clean slate design or start with something that most racers are familiar with? Well, it makes sense to kind of go after that pattern, just like the Camaro did the Mustang in that reference earlier. Even though these have very similar appearances, they are quite different. Let's get into the bowls here and look inside of them. The first difference you will see between the two carburetors when working on them side by side is this is actually a 1/4 inch bowl screw, where the traditional Holley has the 5/16. Just a small difference, but it is a difference. Okay, the carbs are apart, so let's look at some of the differences right out of the gate. First being the bowl screws. The Edelbrock screws are a little bit longer, about a 1/4 inch longer, and that is due to the fuel bowl capacity of the VRS being more than the Holley. So that's an obvious trait. And one thing that is interchangeable is the bowl gaskets. If you're looking to go to a VRS carb, your Holley bowl gaskets will work, as it's the same gasket. That's a very good thing. Now, the major difference comes right here. This is your typical 4150 meter and block gasket. Compare that to that. Night and day difference. And this is where the carburetors start getting real separate from each other. Is the meter and block is the brain of the carburetor. It controls the passages for the emulsion, the idle circuit, the main jet, the power circuit of the power valve. All of that is contained within this block of aluminum. When talking about Holleys, Holley in every other variant, I'm going to say Quick Fuel, Proform, ATM, AED, all of those carburetors are based off of this basic 1957 design Holley 4150. They have the same channels in them for in the meter and blocks. You got your emulsion holes right there, and the main differences between those companies is their tuning of those individual circuits. You see this one has changeable air bleeds. They're all based off of this design, whereas the Edelbrock is a clean slate type deal. And it's very intriguing to me because this meter and block is highly sophisticated. This is not your average meter and block. When you compare the passages of this block to the typical Holley block, there is no comparison. Here is your main 4150 block. This is all for your main circuit tuning right here. This is the main fuel well. Has the emulsion bleeds in there. The idle feed restriction is up here. Mixture screw. Transfer slot comes across. Pretty simple design, really. There's your main jets. And you have your power valve channel restrictions behind the power valve. Nothing special, right? Now I promise you, you will not find another 4150 carburetor that has a meter and block that is like this. Of course, you have your idle feed restriction coming down there. You have your main circuit. Notice that the main circuit is split in two. You have 3 emulsions for the low side, 2 emulsions for the high side, and that's just what I'm referring to it as. And then down here you have your intermediate circuit feed tube. You come over here, you notice that outside the main jets you have another set of jets. This is for the intermediate circuit. This is pretty similar to what you see on a Dominator carburetor, a 3-circuit Dominator. These are just plugs right here. One interesting note, and I've talked a lot about this in my tunnel ran tuning, is about tuning the transfer slot and restricting the fuel to get better control of the fuel curve. Right here is actually a port that is threaded that would control that. So if you would put a restrictor there, you would actually be controlling the fuel flow to the transfer slot. This is just unreal. Looking at this and how this is actually engineered and come about, you can see here on the main body the corresponding passages. Let me get my thumb out of the way. But yeah, you get the idea. Totally different than your typical Holley or Holley clone. Okay, I put them back together and we're going to talk about some differences on the outside. There's plenty of videos about this carburetor, and there's some features that I don't think is talked about on YouTube that is really relevant to the discussion here. Now, of course, we know we got the secondary idle adjustment here on both carburetors. You've got your air bleeds for each individual circuit. Notice you have 4 bleeds here compared to the traditional 2-circuit. Big difference. The center to center from bowl to bowl is slightly larger on the Edelbrock compared to the traditional Holley. But, couple things. The height between the base plate and the top of the air horn up here is about 3/4 of an inch taller than the standard Holley. Now, you may be saying, why does that really matter? Well, with having a taller main body here, which makes the venturi longer, means that there's actually a better signal to the booster of this carburetor compared to the old Holley. Very important. It's about the quality of the fuel flow that's being delivered to the engine. Very, very important. Then one of the coolest features, I think, is you notice that this carburetor does not have a removable base plate. It is cast into the main body just like a Dominator carburetor, where the typical 4150 is removable. One aspect I think that's not talked about, and I think is important, is on every 4150, 4160 Holley, you have screws that are exposed to the intake side of your engine. Now, I have never had one of these screws come loose and go through an engine, but I have had carburetors that I've rebuilt that were older, and I go to remove the screws and they were barely tight. Notice here, there's no exposed screws that could possibly come loose and find its way and ruin your engine. Like I said, I've never seen one of these or had one of these personally come loose, but it's a possibility. So as you can see, there are some differences in those carburetors. It's not just a Holley knockoff. I'm really intrigued by this design, and I'm really looking forward to getting more into the tuning aspect of it. I know this is a very brief video talking about it, but down the road you can expect to see a more detailed video like my other videos on Holley carburetors, going into the VRS and fine-tuning it. But I will say that Edelbrock has done a fantastic job right out of the box as it is. And I think part of that has to do with how the circuits actually communicate with each other. They're overlapping, so it maintains a better air-fuel mixture throughout the entire rev range, from idle all the way up to wide open throttle, which is something that's kind of hard to do with a traditional Holley. You can get it close, but it'll never be exactly right. The carburetor that I was showing is actually slated to go on Micah's little Fox body wagon, Clark. You've seen Clark in previous videos. Check this out. Yeah, that's what that carburetor is slated for. I picked it up, called the guys up at Edelbrock, and had them send me that carburetor because we're getting Clark ready to go to War in the Woods next year. I think that will be really fun to do. War in the Woods is something completely different than any other drag race out there. And I'm actually supposed to drive Uncle Tony's Bottle Rocket, if you remember the grudge race between Bottle Rocket and CASPER. But Tony's wanting to take Bottle Rocket to War in the Woods, so we'll see what happens. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I will catch you later.